we'd like to follow up since the Retro VGS campaign sort of been halted, even though the Indiegogo campaign can't be stopped.
So we'll start with that. The Retro VGS, which we talked about last podcast, was to be, and may still be, a video game system that, at this point, I can't really say what it was aiming for ever, because it changed a lot. But it was going to be a new video game system that utilized cartridges to somehow eliminate the imperfections of modern-day game design with bugs and things like that. The campaign failed miserably. Only raising, I don't think ever breaking 12% of what it was trying to raise.
It didn't get I think 4%.
Oh, it was okay, maybe it was 3%. It raised 65,000 at its height, and then it started to dial backwards and people realized that things were going wrong. We got a considerable amount of grief from that team for our dissection of the campaign. Very unprofessionally. Hold on. I'm fucking hammered right now.
Okay, now I see the tone you're establishing for the segment, Ian.
I can make a joke. Anyways, it's called a joke. That's not an established tone. Whew. Anyways, we were called drunkards for basically dissecting it, and I mean, we didn't have a whole lot good to say about it because, quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of information out. And why would you back any sort of crowdfunding campaign without a lot of info?
We were called. Let's just say we weren't called drunken in any private email or even a private Twitter message. It was publicly on the Retro VGS Facebook page. We had to say that.
Surprisingly, at least to me, well, I'm not surprised that this was that people fought back against that, and they did, calling it very unprofessional, because if you are selling a product, you can't do that. You need to present yourself in a professional manner because you need people to think that you are going to be selling a professional grade product. What surprised me perhaps was how many people latched onto that, and I mean, us as well as the Atari Age forum and Kevtris became the targets of a lot of the Retro VGS ire, which was interesting because
they were placing the blame, the failure of their product and campaign on the detractors.
Instead of addressing major issues, they simply went out of their way to try to cut down the critics that they had. So, I mean, one of the main problems was they did not have a prototype. However,
about 3 or 4 days after criticism of the campaign, and they've always said they said this is probably right. They said they needed like 6 figures to make a prototype. All of a sudden, after all this backlash, I guess one of the 3 participants of the Indiegogo campaign, John Carlson, all of a sudden puts out a very strange 2-minute video showing the Retro V, some sort of board of some type inside a shell of the Atari Jaguar, because it's not a Retro VGS yet, it's an Atari Jaguar shell, and then hooked up to a monitor, and you can't really see what it is. So it just was, the entire thing was strange, just because they said they didn't have a prototype. One of the reasons why they couldn't use Kickstarter. Now, we need all this money to make a prototype, and then 3 years after the campaign launches, people complain there's no prototype. All of a sudden, John Carlson has a prototype. So either they had the prototype all along and were lying about it, or this is actually worse, Carlson had a prototype and was communicating that to Mike, the head of the team. So it's just bizarre.
What happened was the smart people at the Atari Age forum, they donned their Sherlock caps and grabbed their bubble pipes and
got their magnifying glass.
Yes. And, well, actually, that might almost be true. They determined that it was off-the-shelf development boards. So, basically, I mean, if you watch the video, he simply moves a window around. I mean, there's no demo of a game, no usage of the controller. It's just a couple of off-the-shelf development boards underneath the top half of a translucent shell. And that was supposed to satiate people. The problem with it is that it made matters worse. It raised far more questions than it answered. And
the ones I just had.
Yeah, it raised exactly. It raised far more questions than it answered, and this is not to speak ill of the guy because I don't know him, but John Carlson did not come off particularly great in that video. Now, maybe, I mean, I'm an introvert, maybe he is, but whatever it was, that was not the right way to tackle it. He took a swipe at, I believe, Kevtris in that video, and it was just, yeah, all around, that I think was more the nail in the coffin for this current campaign than anything else. Now, I do say nail in the coffin for this current campaign because when they said that they were pulling the plug, they can't officially pull the plug unless Indiegogo breaks their own rules for them. Once the campaign has raised any amount of money, you cannot cancel the campaign, meaning that even though they have divorced themselves from this campaign, it will stay
It'll
up
run
there.
for the rest of we're at 40 days left or 38, whatever.
It should be 30-something. It'll run for the rest of its course. But they said they're going to be back. Now, will it succeed if it returns? I'm going to try to be a little bit positive here. And I don't think other than my joke, because, God, I'm hammered. I don't think if they come out with a clear vision of this, and they say that they're simply making a cartridge-based system that's going to run these indie titles or whatever, or they do something with an FFPGA, and they have a prototype, this very well could be a hobbyist's thing. The problem, I think, is I think that the team behind it spent all their goodwill. Regardless of what this next phase is, if there is a next phase, if these same faces are behind it, I think that even if they show a great product, it's not going to work because of the ill will towards them.
Well, you're going to have the people that bought in the first time, which was about 170 people or so.
I think total, at its height.
About
yes.
170 pledged to get the console. About, 25 pledged to get the off-the-shelf controller or whatever. So you're looking at, for this to be successful, they would have to have sold, I think it was somewhere around 670 consoles, which is what I think would have had them reach their goal. Or,
no, I think it was
6,000.
Yeah, 6,000
It was 6,600 and something. That ain't happening.
That's a bigger user base than the Wii U has.
That
Anyways.
Too much alcohol. So that wouldn't have happened even if the price was slashed in half, and even if there was a reason to buy this. I hate to say that. Like, if there was if you had outstanding games you couldn't get anywhere else. That would even be a tough sort of way to reach it. You know, like the Ouya was $99,
right?
And you had all the games that could be on that.
That's gamble worthy, right?
Yeah.
Right there. You know, I mean, even people who are skeptical could look at something that was $100. Sure, 300 is not a gamble. Well, it is
100.
Some people, but yeah,
100 is not a gamble.
100 is not a gamble. 300 is
350 is a gamble.
Yes, and. This was not my quote. This was someone I saw it somewhere, so this is not my line. But I loved it so much, and I don't know why it wasn't said more. The Retro VGS was a classic case of a solution in search of a problem.
I would agree.
There was no problem. There was no
problem.
need for it.
No, it's not like people were just sitting around saying, "I want to be able to buy $10 games and a $60 cartridge." And then I can't update them or get free DLC from them. No one was saying that.
No.
That was I don't think I had a conversation at any Retro Gaming Expo where people were just saying, damn it, I wish that existed. So, that said, if you come back with this product, you're going to have a lot to answer for if all of a sudden your $2 million goal all of a sudden becomes $500,000 or even $100,000. People are going to be like, well, why was it so much money before? That would be the first natural thing to say.
Right.
Or if you do some sort of radical change and the price comes down, they're going to be like, well, again, why wasn't it that cheap before? So it's hard. Like I said, it's tough to see someone's business venture fail, regardless of pot shots taken at us.
Yeah.
And again, we're just pundits. We're not journalists. We give opinions. We have some news thrown in, but we're just pundits. We call them as we see them.
I'm just a jackass.
You're just drunk.
All the time. Just constantly.
So it won't succeed if it returns. Because this was a product, again, like you just said, no one asked for it.
Right.
And so, which doesn't mean said you can't make money off of the venture already in some weird form, but for what they But what the goal is, I just don't see it happening.
Here's the thing. For them to turn it into something that I think would be something that people would want to mess around with, something that was more open source or hackable, well, then you're entering the area of things that already exist.
Like a Retron 5.
A Retron 5 or a Raspberry Pi, or even a Steam machine.
Steam machine.
To a degree.
Which are all a lot cheaper or the same price, and you can do a lot more with them.
Right. So that's the issue. In the grand scheme of things, if cartridge fetishism is your thing, and you can put a cartridge in and update it, cool. There might be a market for that if it's at the right price, and you can get your campaign down to a low enough level. But it's going to be niche. The dreams of upending the consoles, upending the console market, it's not going to happen. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to realize that this is a hobbyist market that you're trying to enter. And that's the other thing. I don't even think this is necessarily a collector's market, which is what they were shooting for. Their end goal here needs to be something along the lines of a hobbyist market, a programmer's market. And like I said, the problem is other than branding on it, there's already plenty of things that those types of people can use.
Sure. So we'll report on it if it comes back. Otherwise, unless more shots are taken. And hey, I could. I'll just comment this real quick, and we'll move on. Mike sent me a couple of emails. I'm not going to say exactly what was in all of them, but one of his complaints was that he could have come on the show and spoken about the product. We don't do interviews. We had all the information we thought we needed right in the campaign, and I spoke to Mike, whatever it was, the 2 weeks prior for about 15 minutes at Game On Expo in Arizona. I asked him all the questions I needed to then, and I kept out some information that could be somewhat embarrassing if I revealed it. So I didn't even reveal all the information that was told to me, some of the grandiose things that were said to me, some of the things that I think could have been fabricated looking back, and I haven't spoken about that. I'm trying to remain somewhat professional, and so it would behoove a team like this to be professional as well, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
The other thing that's worth mentioning is not only do we not do interviews or have guests, but there were interviews after the fact, some softer and some harder than others, and the questions were never really answered, so nothing would have been gained from that. Nothing would have changed.